Welcome to Rose Red Homestead. Today is another adventure in pressure canning. This time we're going to do beef stew. It's low acid. You see here the meat and the vegetables. All of these things are low acid, so of course we're going to be doing pressure canning. It's a very quick and easy process to do, especially once that the vegetables and the meat are all cut up. So I spent probably half an hour doing it, and Jim pitched in and helped with the meat. And so it took only about a half an hour to cut everything up and get it all ready. And when we're finished, we are going to have 7 meals of beef stew. So we will get started when we come back. All right, we are ready to go. So the first thing I'm going to do is put a jar on my scale. I have 7 pounds of beef chunks right here. So we like our stews very meaty. And so I'm going to be putting 1 pound of beef chunks in the bottom of each one of these jars. And I have the jars all ready over here. And so I'm going to move the meat a little bit closer and just drop in 1 pound. It was such a nice help that Jim helped me get the meat already. Okay, and that's about it. Now I'm going to stomp this down quite a bit, because we have quite a few other things that are going to be going in this jar. Okay, so look at all this meat. Now this meat will cook down and add some liquid of its own to the mix. So we should have a very flavorful beef stew when we are done. Beef stew is one of our go-to meals, especially in the wintertime. It is so easy just to go right out there to our canning shelves and pull one of these jars and have a meal all ready to go. That's what I just really love about all of this. Need to zero this again. And you could, I have chopped onions right here, but you could substitute pearl onions. You could certainly put turnips in. I usually don't follow much of a recipe. I just put in what we like. And I do know that I know how much time it takes to process a beef stew, so it's fairly easy to do. Since these are quarts, and if you've watched any of our previous videos, you know that in pressure canning, we process quarts at 90 minutes. And elevation, as always, creates a variable for us. And in pressure canning, that variable is the amount of pounds pressure that we have to do our processing. So here on the Colorado Plateau at 5,000 feet, we process at 13 psi, pounds per square inch. And when we get outside, you'll see that I have a dial canner, pressure measurer on my canner, which makes it very easy to determine exactly what the pressure is. But not everyone has one of those. Some canners, some of the modern canners also have the calibrated weights where you will choose either 15 pounds or 10 pounds of pressure, depending on what your elevation is. But all of us will process beef stew at the very same time. for the very same time, for 90 minutes, regardless of elevation. So time is not a variable when we're talking about pressure canning. Time is only a variable when we talk about water bath canning. And the timing will need to be adjusted. Processing time needs to be adjusted with water bath canning, but not with pressure canning. All right, so here's our last quart. In goes the meat. And we should have it right up to about a pound. I'm actually going to borrow a couple from some of these others that I got maybe a tad more. Bring this one up just a little bit. I'm just kind of funny that way. I like to have things evenly distributed, although in the end it doesn't really matter at all. Okay, I'm going to set the scale aside and bring the funnel back, rinse it out. So now we will add the vegetables. I'm going to put in about a half a cup of potatoes, half a cup of onions, about a half a cup of carrots, push these down some, and about a quarter of a cup of celery. Okay, that one is done. So the same thing here. Potatoes, onions, carrots, and celery. We will often, after a hard day's work, go right out to our canning shelves and pick up one of these beef stews. And it's such a nice hearty meal. And because you may notice that I'm not putting any, or you will notice that, I'm just guessing half a cup here. I'm not putting in any thickening. And so when these are all processed and come out of the canner, they're going to be very liquid and they're not going to look like stew. It's going to look more like soup. And that's perfectly fine because what we do is when I bring a bottle in from the garage, I will open it up and dump the liquid right into a pan. And then I will stir in a couple of tablespoons of flour for the thickening. And the reason that we do that is that we do not want to add flour or cornstarch or any thickening agent like that at all because it gets too frothy during the processing time and it can make a big mess. It can ruin a good seal. So we certainly don't want that. So here's potatoes, onions, carrots, and celery. These fill very, very quick. So it takes maybe an hour of prep time to get all of this stuff ready to put into the jars, counting washing the jars and getting everything all organized. And so when I just make beef stew from scratch, just one batch at a time for a meal, it probably takes me half an hour or 45 minutes for one meal to get that all ready. And that's not cooking time at all. So when you could just add a little bit more time, you can have 7 quarts ready to go. And so I think that that's quite a time saver. I know it is for us. Really having to push these veggies down. All right, coming up is our very last jar. And I am obviously going to have a few vegetables left over, but I don't have any more room in the jars, so this time I can't go back and backfill any of these jars. So I will just freeze these vegetables until next time we make beef stew, and then I'll have them ready to go. Okay, I'll set these aside. Take a second and wipe off my countertop. All right, now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to bring the beef broth over. And have it ready. I'm going to put a few different spices in, and I hardly ever measure, so I figured that I'll probably just not measure here either. I just put a little spot of pepper in, and this is Italian seasoning. I'll put in probably about a teaspoon of that, 1 bay leaf, and then just a little bit. I will either use 1 clove of garlic, or this time I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of garlic powder on the top. Then I'm going to give this broth one last stir here. Now I just made this broth from bouillon powder, so it's very easy. And I'm going to fill this with broth up to about the 1-inch line. And I really overshot that. Let me see if I can get some airspace here. There, that's better. All right, I'm going to have to dump some out. Now, I use just a table knife to go down the sides and try to release any air pockets that might be in there. You can buy fancy tools for this. Some people think that you might run the risk of scratching the inside of the jar so that it might break. I've never had that happen. So I'm going to watch more carefully this time to make sure that I don't overfill it. There, that's about right. Run the knife down to let any air pockets escape. Sometimes that means I need to put more broth in. And this time it certainly does. And a little pepper. This time I got smart. I'm putting the seasoning in after the broth in case I overfill like I did last time. I have to pour some out and make a mess. And the bay leaf. Okay. I need to put a little bit more in this other jar. Just a bit. Okay. Bay leaf, pepper, exactly 1 teaspoon of thyme and a little sprinkle of garlic powder. And now, running the knife down to see if we can release any air, and we certainly are. I'm going to move this out of the way so you maybe can see that. Yeah, we've released air that now I'm going to need lots more liquid. Okay. Liquid. Release the air. Wow, that was a lot right there. And a little more fill. And spices. Bay leaf. Pepper. A teaspoon of thyme. Garlic. That one's good. As tight as we think we have these things, especially this meat, running a knife down the side of the jar is really important because it does allow that air to escape, and we want as little air as possible in these jars. Finish filling with broth. And bay leaf. Pepper. And again, I'm not doing any salt. If you've watched any of our other videos, you know that I don't can with salt because Jim and I are limiting our salt. We're trying to get really healthy. And so far it's working. So we're quite pleased about that. Woo, lots of air. That's good, getting it all out. Bay leaf, pepper, thyme, garlic, and a little more broth. And our last jar. Broth. And pepper, bay leaf, thyme, garlic, and we can set our broth aside. Now what I need to do is clean off these jars because they all got dripped on. I've got to find a different cup rather than those measuring cups that drip all over the place, so that when I pour things into these jars, it won't be so darn drippy. So I have this moistened paper towel, and I'm just going to run it around the top edge of each of these jars. And the canner is already out there on the stove, and it is nice and warm. I can look through the back patio doors and see that there is a little steam coming up from it. So these jars are not super hot at all. They're just kind of lukewarm, so it won't cause a problem when we're putting them down in that water. Okay. Now my lids and rings are right here, so I'm going to go ahead and put them on the top. And fasten the lids down, the rings down finger tight. So here we have 7 quarts ready to go in the canner. Now I'm going to get these on a tray and take them out there, but it probably took us easily under 15 minutes to fill all of these jars and get them ready for the canner. So counting about a half an hour to prepare the vegetables and about 15 minutes or less to get these jars ready, we have, in a 45-minute prep period, we have 7 quarts of stew ready to go. Now, depending on the size of your family, you would open 1 or 2 or however many you might need for an evening meal. And just think how easy that will be. So meet me out at the canner and we'll get these rolling right away. So here we are out at my canning station. Jim built this nice windbreak for us. And I have 4 jars already in the canner, and I'm putting the last 3 in. The water has popped up to a boil. And I'm just going to put these last 3 in. And now I'm going to put the lid on. And slide it over into place. Now, the first thing that's going to happen is that steam is going to come out of here. Steam is also going to make this little airlock rise up so it's completely locked in place. And then we're going to see the needle start to rise. Now, if you've watched any of our other videos, you'll know that one of the most important things that we have to do is we have to let this vent right here blow steam for 10 minutes, and it's not even close to doing that yet. So if you want to actually see that, you can check another one of our pressure canning videos. I think I've included it in just about every one. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and let this vent steam for 10 minutes, and then I'll put the weight on, and here's my weight. I just drop it right on right there. And then the needle will start to rise, and once it gets up to 13 pounds, then we're going to start our timing. And we will time it for 90 minutes. Then we will also let it cool down naturally. So we'll be back probably in about, an hour and a half, 45 minutes, and probably 2 hours. And by that time, the canner should be cool, and we'll be ready to take the stew in their jars out of the canner, and we can see what the results are. So we will see you shortly. All right, it has been just about 2 hours, and the pressure indicator is down to 0. I'm going to tilt the weight just a little bit to get rid of the last bit of the steam. and it's ready. And the airlock vent just fell as well. So it's now safe to open up the canner. So I'm going to do that, making sure that the lid protects my face and the steam will go the other direction. This is always the most exciting part for me. And I'll tell you, as many times as I have done this, I never get tired of this moment. This moment when we can lift out the results of all of our labor to see what we've got. It's very exciting. So here we go. All right, 1 quart of beautiful beef stew. Still boiling away there. Tip it to get the water off. And we're going to move that right over here to the rack. And I'll be bringing 6 more over. The veggies always seem to go to the top and the meat to the bottom. Someone in our neighborhood is firing a gun. You might be able to hear that in the background. It's still fairly cool here. And it probably will go below freezing again tonight. So we will let these stay out here several hours until they have pretty much cooled completely. And then we will bring them in the house. I was hoping that we'd be able to hear some of them pop, but it looks like that's not going to happen. But I'm very pleased with our outcome today. We have 7 new quarts of beef stew. And we will, once these have cooled, take them in the house and I'll wash the jars off with hot soapy water. And then we will get them back out into our canning shelves to add to our growing collection of wonderful meals that we can just pull off the shelf and eat at a moment's notice. Thank you so much for being with us today. We always appreciate you. If this video is to your liking, please give us a thumbs up on it. And subscribe to our channel so that you can continue to receive notifications whenever we publish a new video. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.